This is the main gallery of the Japanese American National Museum, and the exhibit that you see here currently is titled America's Concentration Camp, the Japanese American Experience. It's an exhibit on the internment of American citizens who happened to be of Japanese ancestry during the Second World War in these barbed wire encampments.
The museum, before it was a museum, was a part of your youth.
Yes, this building resonates for me. When it was a Buddhist temple, I used to come here as a child for weddings and funerals. When the Second World War broke out, this building became the assembly point for many of the Japanese Americans who lived in the neighborhood here. And it was from here that we were taken to the camps. During the war, this building served as a repository for a lot of the valuables that Japanese Americans couldn't take into the camps. And after the war, when we came back to Los Angeles, housing was very difficult for Japanese Americans. We were not a welcome group of people. And so this building then became the dormitory for the early people returning from the camps back to Los Angeles.
Tell me about your youth at Rower.
Well, before we went to Rower, we were taken to Santa Anita Racetrack, which was called a temporary assembly center. All these euphemisms, you know, the camps were called relocation centers. I mean, you know, governmental euphemisms. And we were housed in the stables there. And actually, I have fond memories of that. It was kind of fun for us kids.
Camping.
Camping, right, and living in horse stables. Smell that. You know, isn't that great? You know, of course, for our parents, it was quite something else. And while we were there, I think we were there for a couple of months, the camps were being built. And when the one in Arkansas, Rower, was completed, we were put on a train. And that's where I begin my book, our long train ride to all across the southwest of America, to Arkansas, to begin our internment, our incarceration in these barbed wire camps. For my parents, it was a wrenching experience. My father had his business, we had a home, we had, most of all, dreams, our future here. That was all wrenched away from them. Everything was lost. The vultures swooped down. They knew that we had to leave on very short notice. We had furnitures, we had cars, we had refrigerators. My father sold his car for $5 because it was better than just leaving it here. My mother's brand new refrigerator was sold for $1 because otherwise it would have had to been left there. My father was a bibliophile. He collected books, and he had a rather extensive collection of books that he didn't want to lose, so he put them in storage. He, I guess, didn't know about this facility being available here at the Buddhist temple, and so he put it in warehouse storage. And all during the time that we were in camp, he kept up the payments. When we came back, it was gone. They accepted the payments every month, but with no explanation. So they were stripped of everything. And so for my parents, that long train ride was probably the most bleakest experience in their lives.
It's on that train trip that we first learn just how tenacious your mother is.
She's a pretty tough lady. She's a very defiant lady. And although my father initially was very struck by that experience, and he was almost paralyzed by it, my mother was the one that said, you know, we've got to keep the family going. And she was the one that organized the things. She got books and candies, children's storybooks and candies and little Cracker Jack boxes and things like that into this great big huge carry-all bag. And it was a huge voluminous thing filled with lots of goodies, and she kept it very secret. I mean, she would just dole out these goodies for us on that train. And my memory is that was a wonderful bag, because for us kids, great treats would emerge from them. But later, when we arrived at Arkansas, we discovered that my mother had smuggled in a contraband in that bag as well.
Right, her sewing machine.
Her sewing machine. Machinery was verboten, but she needed her sewing machine to make clothes for the kids, and she was determined, and she got that past all those guards. She's a very tough lady. Once we arrived in Arkansas, there was economic pluralism, educational pluralism, geographic pluralism. There were fishermen from San Pedro. There were college-educated people from Los Angeles. There were farmers from Nyland. They were all put together. And somehow we had to build a community. And my father pitched in, with the basic physical things like getting the Army beds to the various barracks, all the things that needed to be done. Brigades would be formed, and he would be pitching in. And my father had some leadership qualities, I guess, and so the block voted him block manager, and he became something like the mayor of the block there, represented the community with the camp administration, and did whatever negotiating that needed to be done. And whatever internal difficulties there were, he mediated that.
In your book, you talk a lot about the camps. Tell me what's different about you, what it changed in George Takei, having been through that experience.
I was much too young to really understand the meaning of that experience. All my real memories of camp are fond memories. In Arkansas, catching pollywogs or dragonflies, or tromping through the swamps in the summertime, and in the winter discovering snow for the first time. It was a magical world in Arkansas. I was 4 years old, 5 years old, and then at Tule Lake, I have memories that are a little bit sharper, although I must say I had a lot of fun there too. We had a dog and Blackie, which was great fun. But the elements were a little bit sharper and harsher there. The wind was much, much more cutting, cold and hard and relentless. The ground was gritty and hard and sharp, and it wasn't the soft dirt, the warm dirt of Arkansas. And I do remember a riot that happened at Tule Lake. And so I do have some of those memories, but they really weren't comprehensible memories for me. And it wasn't until after I was out of camp that I started to realize what that meant. And my reaction to that was shame, disgrace. That camp was something like jail.
Right.
And only bad people went to jail. And so there must be something bad about us. When you're a child, 8, 9, 10 years old, you want to be normal. After camp, we moved from an all-Japanese American camp. We were plunged into first the Skid Row section of Los Angeles, and then into the Mexican barrio. We were the only Japanese family, we were the only Asian family in this Mexican-American neighborhood, barrio. So physically, we were very different. Culturally, we were very different. And this growing awareness that we were in something like jail set me apart. And my parents really didn't talk that much about camp either. So there was this aura of this unspoken disgrace.
It was kind of sad to me to find out that a teacher was really one of your first encounters with racism.
That's right.
A teacher.
I can't forget her, Mrs. Rugen. I got very strong, cold, negative vibrations from her from the beginning. But then one day I heard her refer to me on the schoolyard as that little Jap boy, and she continually used that. And when I first heard it, it stung like a bullet. And it was very painful, particularly because I was becoming aware of camp and what it meant. But what galls me even more to this day is the fact that I didn't protest, I didn't object. I just took the hurt, swallowed the pain, and contained it. because I thought maybe I deserved it, that there's something bad about being Japanese, and here's this teacher is hurting me, and maybe we deserve to be hurt like that. And I'll never forget that teacher. I hated her. We were in Block 2 in the second barrack here at this far end, and this was a mess hall, and I remember when it snowed, this wonderful snowy run from our unit to the mess hall. There was a creek right here, a ditch with stagnant water, and this is where we used to catch pollywogs, and this is where the barbed wire fence was. I wasn't at Manzanar, but I was there when the historic marker was placed at the guardhouse there. Oh, these symbolize the barracks, and there's one here in this block symbolically. These are all barracks here. And in the center, usually, I wasn't at Manzanar, so I can't explain how this was laid out, but in the middle was the mess hall and the wash area and the shower. Some kind of altercation. I was about that age when I first went into camp, and I remember those guard towers. We arrived by train, but many people arrived by bus, and that's them being unloaded with the armed guards there. You know, you grow through stages, don't you? You know, that stage when you feel ashamed for being Japanese and feeling guilty for it. And then as a teenager, you understand that, no, that was wrong. That America has certain ideals and certain ideals that you got to fight for. And you become the activist, the self-righteous, person who's going to make this country better. And you start feeling your juices as an idealistic young kid. And in that blind idealism, that conversation with my father I can never forget, and I can never undo. And my strongest wish is that I could undo it. But my father's gone now. I accused him of taking us like sheep to slaughter into camp. It was a very heated discussion on my part, and my father ultimately said, "Maybe you're right." And he went into his bedroom and closed the door. I think in many ways I felt I had to write this book as an apology to him for that.
In your book, page 187, you talk about Fly Blackbird, and I know we're jumping forward a bit. It affected an enormous number of people. And you say, one of them was me. I gained friends and insights that led me to a deeper understanding of this ever-changing, ever-developing new breed of humans called Americans. And as a people, we may have varied histories tracing back to the Mayflower or the slave ships or split-rail corrals or to barbed wire fences. But whatever our histories, however tortured and adversarial they may have been, our destinies are bound inextricably together. We have a common future. Our challenge lies not in carrying the weight of our pasts like anchors, but in working in concert to build that common tomorrow.
I really feel that.
That to me was your thesis of the book.
Exactly. That is it.
Now in college you studied architecture.
I love architecture. It's another love of mine. And to my parents, it was the more acceptable of my two loves, architecture and the theater. They knew that I was a ham and I loved the theater and acting, but they thought, well, that's something that's fine for a cultured person to have. You do that as a hobby. You go to the theater after a hard day's work, but work is something serious, and architecture is something respectable. But after 2 years as a student of architecture up at Berkeley, I had to think, 10 years down the road, I'm going to be working as an architect, there's still that gnawing, I coulda, woulda, shoulda inside me. And I didn't want to live with that. You know, and what I really wanted to do at that time was to go to New York and enroll at the Actors Studio, which produced Marlon Brando, James Dean, you know, all of the great luminaries of the theater, Rod Steiger, Lee J. Cobb, you know, and that's where I wanted to study. But my father said, that's a very well-respected acting institution, but when you finish there, they won't give you a piece of parchment that says you're a legitimately educated person. He said, if you really want to go to New York, you know, you got to know that New York is a tough place, it's an expensive place, it's a competitive place, and you've got to be willing to do that all on your own. But we want you to go to UCLA, and since that's what the option that we would like you to take, you'll have subsidy if you go there. I was a practical kid. I went with the subsidy.
A little gentle persuasion.
He was a deal maker. He knew how to give you a deal you couldn't say no to.
That's great, though.
I'm glad I took that deal, too, as a matter of fact, the way it turned out, because I was seen in the student production at UCLA, and that's what got me my first feature film. A casting director happened to be in the audience, saw me, plucked me out, and plunked me into a film with Richard Burton, none other than.
And you also broke into television.
That's right, Playhouse 90.
Made in Japan.
And that was, again, another wonderful way to make a debut into television. The most highly lauded, most respected drama anthology of its time, a 90-minute live television drama with all of the shining lights, the shooting comet stars of the time, Geraldine Page, Paul Newman, who were some of the others, Jack Palance,
Robert Redford,
and all of the writers of that time, Patty Chayefsky, Rod Serling, all those bright shining stars of writing and acting and directing. Your
life has taken a very distinct path. Do you think there's something out there that kind of pushes you towards your path, or is it all you're doing? Or?
Oh, no. I know it's a combination of all these forces. For example, and this I talk about in the book, we were about to be deported to Japan right after the end of the war. And if this one individual, this idealistic civil rights attorney from San Francisco, Wayne Collins, hadn't stepped into our situation, we would have been on that boat. And if we were, our family had been shipped to Japan, I could be the same flesh and blood, but I'd probably be speaking to you in a different language. I would not find my identity in the name George Takei. I would probably hold totally different values. I would be a different person altogether. This is the program from the Royal Charity premiere of a film that I did, a British film, Return from the River Kwai. We shot this on location in the Philippines. It's a continuation of the story of Bridge over the River Kwai. And I played the part of the commandant, as you probably can see from this photo here. This is a scene from a play titled Undertow that I did at the world-famed Edinburgh Arts Festival in Edinburgh, Scotland. It's a two-character play, a Japanese soldier and an American GI marooned together on an island, despite the fact that they're polar enemies politically, that they're completely different. He's much older than the young GI. They don't speak a common language, and yet they discover that they need to not only work with each other, but they need to struggle together in order to survive on this tropical island, and ultimately they get to liking each other, despite the fact that they don't have a common language. My role was completely in Japanese, and the audience understood me through the English-speaking GI's reactions. This play won the Scotsman First Award. This is the film that I did between the first and second season of Star Trek during the hiatus. Don't I look blooming? The other guy, of course, you recognize immediately. It's John Wayne. This is a film that I did, film titled The Green Berets. Here I am as the cover boy for AZM magazine. It's their holiday issue, so there I am getting ready to celebrate with a flute of champagne. A cover boy again, this time of Trans-Pacific magazine. They did a feature on me, but this is also the magazine that I write a monthly column for. It's called Vantage Point, and it's an opportunity for me to sound off with my many opinions monthly. In 1984, the Olympics were held in Los Angeles, and I had the unique privilege and honor of carrying the Olympic flame on its journey from Greece all the way to the turnstiles of the Coliseum where the Olympics were held. And the kilometer that I got to carry the flame was a very special and symbolically significant one. I received the flame at the O Plaza, which is the birthplace of Los Angeles, and I ran down Los Angeles Street, across the Hollywood freeway, or actually over the Hollywood freeway, past the Los Angeles City Hall where Mayor Bradley was standing on the steps there waving at me, and I passed the flame on at the gateway to Little Tokyo, my ethnic turf, so to speak. The exciting thing happened when I went for my interview with Gene Roddenberry, and he started describing the show, and it was a dazzling concept. This starship of the 23rd century exploring new galaxies, new life forms. I mean, you know, that whole idea of exploration, that whole idea of challenge. But then he started describing my character, Sulu, and I knew that he was talking about a breakthrough role, because never in regular weekly series television had an Asian character been depicted the way he described Sulu, a member of the leadership team of a starship, a full professional carrying his weight.
An astrophysicist.
Astrophysicist, and having elements, qualities of the classic hero. And I walked out of there just desperate to get cast in that role. And I did get cast. It's an incredible project, and you want it to sell, and you want to do your best in it. And so it was all these emotions coming into play when I drove down to Desilu Culver way back in 1965.
Is it ever frustrating for you to be famous because of your involvement in Star Trek, and yet have so many other things that you've done so well that maybe didn't get that same acclaim?
I think my life has changed completely by my association with Star Trek. In my political activities, the very fact that I became a candidate, Star Trek played a great part in. I can walk into a bank and the loan officer, you know, first presents me with a Star Trek photo for me to autograph before before we start talking business. And so already that's kind of softened him up for whatever discussions I have to get into. This museum, I'm able to participate on the level that I am as a director, a member of the board, because Star Trek has made so many things possible. My economic success, my visibility, my ability to be able to speak on behalf of the museum to so many other groups. It is an amazingly potent element that's been injected into my life as George Takei by Gene Roddenberry.
We have to talk about the cast, and the first person we have to talk about is Walter Koenig.
Walter is a guy who, before I even met him, I hated. I went off during the hiatus between the first season and the second season to do a movie on location in Georgia. And all during the first season, I'd lobbied Gene Roddenberry for him to enhance the character of Sulu. And he did that with many, many scripts for the second season. And he gave me those scripts to take with me to Georgia. And all during the time that we were shooting there, I kept going over and savoring and getting really into the wonderful new things that Sulu had to do. But we had a horrible rain that disrupted the filming, and we went way over schedule, and I couldn't be back in time to begin the second season's work on Star Trek. And so Walter was given, they created the character of Chekhov, and they gave all of the hard lobbied for games that Sulu made, all to Chekhov. Gamesters of Triskelion, Trouble with Tribbles, all those wonderful scripts that Walter got. And so I came back determined to not like this thief of all my hard work. And he's turned out to be one of my best friends. I guess relationships that begin with an intense emotion eventually become intense in another way as well.
Walter's played a few jokes on you, though.
He's a trickster. And yes, I am also a very trusting soul, and I blithely, innocently, sheep-like, lamb-like walk right into them.
You have a lot of respect for Leonard Nimoy.
He's one of those extraordinary people who lives by principle. When I ran for public office, and he's a political activist too, so he's got a lot of connections. And all my friends pitched in and helped. But Leonard helped me get the endorsement of the Democratic State Central Committee. And we've campaigned together on many other causes. Walter was fantastic. He did innumerable coffee clutches and openings of headquarters and all those things. He really pitched in. And Nichelle is so wonderful with her singing talent. We had fundraiser dinners, and she was always there as our headline entertainer. But Leonard is someone who acts on principle and on ideals. And I know that for a fact that Nichelle and I owe our association with Star Trek to a very, very strong and principled stand that Leonard took when, because of, as they say, budgetary considerations, Nichelle and I were eliminated from doing our own voices in the animated version of Star Trek. And Leonard said, well, if that's so, then you don't want me as well. And he was willing to walk. And it was because they needed Leonard, and because he took that strong position, that Nichelle and I were brought back.
Tell me about William Shatner.
Well, Bill, we're all actors. And actors have egos. Any actor worth their salt have egos. But I think most of us recognize that our performances get enhanced if we have good people around us and we are able to work with them. Unfortunately, I think Bill is someone who's victimized by his ego. He can't recognize that he can become better by playing with the ensemble. And I think Bill's acting does have the quality of a solitary performance. That's why it lends itself so well to caricature, that strange broken speech that he has, which can play against a wall as well as another actor. He can do it alone as easily as with other actors. That makes it very difficult for others to participate when he has concomitant with that ego the power of the star, the lead in the series. So our professional experience has not been what it really could have been.
So, how is it you came to transportation, George?
Well, back in 1973, I helped, or actually in 72, I helped Mayor Bradley get elected mayor of the city of Los Angeles. And shortly thereafter, he asked me to serve as his appointee on the board of directors of the Southern California Rapid Transit District. And he said, well, you probably have more experience and background for public transportation, more qualification than some of the other people. They're attorneys, businessmen, people like that. You're an former architecture student. You studied urban planning. You're a civic activist. You know the neighborhood and the city, and you're a quick study. And so I think you can do a good job. And I must say, it's been a wonderful, engaging 11 years. We have what's called an honor fare system. We trust the people to walk up to the machine, buy their tickets, and hold their ticket in their hands and get on the system. And certainly there'll be those that will try to take advantage of the system. And so we have occasionally security people that go through and if they don't have a ticket, then the fine is very severe. Because it is ripping off the other good people who have played their part in supporting the system. Now, this is my domain, my turf. You know, this would be a great place to throw a party, wouldn't it? You don't have to worry about the spills. We can wipe them up right away.
And they did that on purpose, didn't they? It looks like if somebody spray painted it would come right off.
Yeah, I call graffiti urban terrorism. What graffiti does is it sends a message out to people that the public authorities cannot secure their public space. And extending that means that they can't assure your personal safety in this space. And that's why we want to make absolutely sure that there's no graffiti here, and if one should appear, we want to be able to get rid of it immediately. Now here's a map here that gives you an idea. We got on here. Right. We're going to go through the Tom Bradley Civic Center station, and we're going to go to the Union Station, which is our railroad station. This is going to be the transportation hub of Southern California. It's where the rail lines all converge. And here we are in the old Union Station. Here again you see the columns with the capitals that sort of echo the pillars that we saw down there. And
it's a lot like what it looked like when you were a kid.
This was the very space that I walked into when I was a child, coming back to Los Angeles, my hometown, from Tule Lake internment camp. And this was a space that so bedazzled me.
You've been the writer, the politician, the actor. What's next?
I'm working on a novel now. Public service is something that always engages me, but I think it's also an important part of life. And I know that I'll be involved on that level in that door that I've walked through. And acting in the theater will always be a part of my life, on whichever side of the footlights I might be on. I live in theaters, whether it's on the stage or in the audience. And if there are other doors that might loosen for me to peek into, I'm ready to boldly go where I've never been before.
First off, I got to tell you, I made your agent laugh.
Have you met him?
Yes.
Have you seen him? You know, he's this big, and his cowboy hat is as wide as he is tall.
James, believe me, the dates are fine. The offer is going to be great. I read the script. I love it. Okay? So I'll talk to you later. We'll send you the script. Give my best to Wendy and the kids, okay? Okay, buddy. Thanks. George, how can you call me a buckaroo deal maker? Do I look like a cowboy to you? Now, George, I mean, I really appreciate you talking about me, but, you know, it has been a while since I've rodeoed. You know that. Okay? But I appreciate all the nice things you said about me.
He's no nonsense, though.
Oh, yeah.
And he's done a lot for you.
He has. He has.
Yeah.